Okay, hello again everyone. We're gonna do something a little bit different today. I'm going to talk about my inspirations for some of the things that I build. Um, some of you may know by now that my background is in architecture, and so I've studied a bit of architecture history and theory and all that. And so I don't just come up with the stuff that I build just out of my head, out of nothing, right? So a lot of the stuff that I do, I get ideas from real architecture in the real world. So I want to talk a little bit about that in this video. So we'll go in the order of the things, go in the order in which the things were built. So the first thing I built in my world was this crystal tower. Now most of this I just built. I just, built it out of pretty much nothing. Like I didn't have any basis for it, except for this bit here at the top. This kind of a floating island, although as you can see there's like supposed to be glass arches holding it up. So I've got a little bit of a slideshow here as well. Let me go to that. Alright, hope that's working. So in Minecraft we're talking about the crystal tower and the floating island at the top. In terms of architectural inspiration, well, it's not really real architecture, it's more of an anime, a cartoon. But it's Studio Ghibli's Laputa Castle in the Sky. And if you've never seen it before, it's pretty good. You might want to look it up on DVD. Otherwise, you see that thing in the sky with the tree and the castle in the background. Well, that's Laputa. That's the floating island. That's the main part of the story, right? And I guess I don't talk too much about it, except basically it's a floating island in the sky with a tree on it, which is pretty awesome. Or not, like if you haven't seen the anime you might not think it's very awesome, but it is awesome. So that's what I had in my head when I built this. I mean obviously this is nowhere near as big or as interesting, but given the limited space that I had, that's what I built. An island with a tree on it. So then after the tower, the next thing I built was the storage. That thing there. So let's walk over there and we'll cheat a bit. Take the quick way down. So the second thing I built was a storage. And for the storage building, the inspiration was Neoclassical architecture. For example, the British Museum and the Bank of England. And Neoclassical architecture basically is a copy, but I guess it's also a development of proper classical architecture, which is Greek and Roman architecture. So you have these columns, and you have these kind of pediments and triangular things and rectangular things, and everything has a kind of an order and a rhythm to it, and proportions. So that's basically the idea. And the reason I chose these is because you might notice we're talking about the British Museum, which is like a storage for cultural artifacts, and the Bank of England, which is like storage for money and valuables. And so, these cultural institutions and these kind of banking institutions often would want to portray an image of grandeur and permanence. I mean, especially for a bank. If a bank looks like it's poor and run down, you wouldn't trust your money with them, right? And so because they have money, and they want to project the image that they have money, they'll build these grand buildings. And what happens is that people have come to associate this type of architecture with permanence and stability and wealth. And so then it's appropriate for that to become then, you know, a storage, which is also talking about, you know, keeping all the stuff you have and having a lot of diamonds, you know, like wealth in Minecraft is measured in those terms, in the materials you have. And so because, you know, this language of columns and rectangular things and you know, like this form is associated with like I said, museums and banks and things, and so I considered it to be appropriate for the storage, and so that's why I built this like that. Now the next thing I did is the hanging gardens, the so-called hanging gardens. Obviously nothing's actually hanging, but the point is it's gardens built on top of artificial terraces, and that apparently... Why there's zombies? Anyway, that apparently is what the hanging gardens was. It's really close. Anyway, so that's what the hanging gardens were, and this is loosely based on Park Güell in Barcelona, Spain by Antonio Gaudi. I'll show you the images of it. So, hanging gardens based on Park Güell. I think it's pronounced Park Güell, I'm not sure, by Antonio Gaudi, and it looks like that. Well, parts of it look like that. Obviously it's a park, so there's a lot of it. But you know, parts of it has terraces with these, you know, columns holding it up. And you know, these elevated walkways with, again, columns. Now, as you can see, these columns are quite intricate, right? With a lot of bits and pieces to it. And it's very difficult to make these sorts of shapes in Minecraft. You know, Minecraft being all cubes, and none of these things being cubes. So anyway, I did terraces and columns, and you know, to be honest, looking at this, I can probably improve what I've built just by copying a little bit more of this stuff. Anyway, so this is the sort of thing that I've been looking at. And you know, I didn't want too many columns because I thought that would, you know, make it a little bit too dark on the inside. So I was experimenting a bit, and you know, it's a lot taller, so it doesn't feel as intimate as the things in Park Güell. Like, it doesn't feel as enclosed. At least on this side. I walked to the other side. I think it's a little bit better on the other side. Anyway, you can see the idea, right? So you have these terraces, you have these columns, and then you have plants all over everything. Yeah, not much more to say about that. Although maybe if I were a bit more generous with the terraces, like have them come out around the columns a bit. I'm not sure. Anyway, that's what, you know, this part of the hang garden is based on. And then up top is just... This thing was based on nothing, I just made that up. So the top of the terraces... Yeah, anyway, I won't dwell too much on it. But you might notice that the hanging gardens is one of the things in my world that I am not completely satisfied with. Although I don't really have any idea how to improve it. To be perfectly honest, I don't know what to do about it. So yeah, that's the idea behind that. Now the next thing I built was the wall, if I remember correctly. The wall that's going to be at the boundary between the land before the biomes and the land after the biomes. If you guys have watched my previous video, you'll know what I'm talking about. I'll cut out the part where I walk over there because it's quite a long walk. Okay, so that's the wall there. It looks like that at the moment. Some of you have been asking how the wall is going. Well, it's 3 modules and the middle bit now and then. So it's 3 more modules and then a bit more, and then that's one side of it done. So the wall is based loosely on Roman bridges and aqueducts. And to show you what they look like. So that's a Roman bridge. And that's also a Roman bridge. And that's a Roman aqueduct. And now I say Roman for a very specific reason. In European architecture, like the Greeks didn't use a lot of arches. They weren't very good with arches. The Romans were the first, well, not the first, but I don't know if they were the very first. But anyway, the Romans used a lot of arches. And particularly their arches were mostly semicircular. Now if you know a bit about engineering or about physics, like semicircular arches are relatively easy to make because circles are quite easy to draw, but in terms of the forces, they're not the most efficient. Like the parabolic arches are more efficient than semicircular arches, but because these are easy to make, and the Romans, I don't think they figured out how to make parabolic arches at that point. And so all of the arches are semicircular. And so there's a certain look to them. They look very regular. Like the geometry is quite simple. And it's just very modular and it repeats itself. And so I chose that for my structure. Mostly aqueducts. And I mean, I call it the wall because in a way it is a wall between the inside and the outside, what I've decided to be the inside and outside of my area. But I didn't want it to be a solid thing because I wanted to be able to look out. And there's no need for it to be a solid thing because, it's not like we're gonna get invaded by an army or anything. They're just creepers and spiders, right? So I want to define the boundary, but I didn't want something solid, so I decided, well, might as well make it something like an aqueduct or something like bridges so you can see through it, but nevertheless it defines the line between one side and the other. And semicircles were, I guess, easy to build here as well. In Minecraft, as in the real world, semicircles are easier than parabolic arches. So and also the modularity is useful. I think I've explained it previously when I discussed the wall, but because it's going to be so big, and because the Minecraft world itself is divided into modules of 8x8 chunks, they're called. And so it's easier to have a structure that fits into that module. So that's 8 blocks wide and that's 16 blocks wide for the small arch. And so everything fits into the existing system, which then makes that easier to fit into the world without having to do a lot of customization and tinkering. Anyway, after the bridge, or after I started the bridge, I haven't finished it. After that were the statues. First the 2 Sentinels, and then Aquarium. Let's get to a good spot. And whoa, wait. Staircase? Oh, I messed up the slide anyway. So the next up is the Sentinels and Aquaria, and those are based on Art Deco figures. Now unfortunately I couldn't well, I found a lot of images in Google, but not all of them were very good. But the ones I'm thinking about are the statues that are parts of buildings. Like sometimes you see them as columns, or you see them against the side of the walls, and they're fairly simple. But the thing with Art Deco is that they're very simple, usually very simple lines. So like this one, the figures are very simplified, and they're very basic, and they're also very austere. And so that was the look I was going for, so kind of fairly serious, somber. If you play Bioshock is mostly Art Deco. So that kind of style is what I was going for. And unfortunately I only have those two. But if you Google Art Deco, you'll find a lot of things and you'll get a feel for the style that I was going for. And to be perfectly honest, these aren't really Art Deco statues. Like the proportions are not the same. Art Deco usually go for like cleaner, straight lines, and so the broad shoulders on the armor here is not that much like Art Deco. Like if you can see, we can't really see it very well. So the broad shoulders is not really Art Deco, and the legs I think should be straight if I was going for Art Deco. And for Aquaria as well, the proportions are, let's say, it's a bit more generous than they would be. The shoulders are broader, the hips are wider. So in the end they weren't really Art Deco statues, although that's the research I looked at when I was designing them, or when I was thinking about them. But also, as I was building them, the Art Deco stuff, it seemed a little too simple, I think. Because Minecraft is all just cubes, and they're pretty big cubes as well. And when you do simple lines, in a world full of simple lines, then it becomes nothing special. The world's already full of straight lines and cubes already. If you make a statue that's kind of cubical and straight, it doesn't really stand out, And so I think as I was building them, they evolved into the shapes they are now, which is a bit rounder, a bit more generous, a bit wider, a bit more curvy. Anyway, that's the statues. So yeah, I messed up my slides. Anyway, next up is the Sentinel Valley staircase, and that's the staircase underneath the statues, right? And the inspiration for this was the Spanish Steps in Rome. And if we go past that, so those are the Spanish Steps. Basically, somewhere in the middle of Rome, there's this giant staircase that links two streets. One street is lower down, and the next street is further up. And there's a staircase, this huge, grand staircase that winds up from one to the other. And as you can see, you have stairs, and then the stairs kind of go apart on both sides onto a terrace, and then it goes apart on two sides on the terrace again, and then it goes to the next street. And this is another image of it. It's not quite straight, and then at the top there's this kind of building there as well. I think that's a church. And I think more important than the shape of the stairs is the people. Look how many people there are. And they're all just hanging out. They're just sitting around hanging out. And that's the kind of space the Spanish Steps is. It's a great place to just hang out. And when when you talk about stairs, you don't think of them as places you just sit around and do nothing in. That's a park or a square. You go to a park to hang out. But the stairs here, they're so wide, right? And they're so big, and there's so much space that they become like a park and like a square, except they're also stairs. And it's quite nice, the stairs are easy to sit on. The shape of the stairs, you just kind of sit on them quite easily, and it's a place in a busy city where you can just hang out. And so, architecturally it's good, but in terms of social and the contribution to the urban life, it's also a good space. Now, of course, in the Minecraft world, I'm the only one here, right? So you're not gonna get several hundred people hanging out on these stairs. But you know, that's the idea, and that's why the stairs are way bigger than they need to be. And also, you know, you see them going up both sides onto a kind of a terrace, and then around both sides again onto a terrace. So that's the idea. I mean, it's obviously nowhere near. Well, it's kind of like the Spanish Steps, but it's also quite different. So anyway, that's the winding staircase. And the next thing, so I've decided to call these pavilions. There's a stone pavilion, the wood pavilion, and I think the next one will be a glass pavilion. I actually haven't thought about that very much yet. Anyway, the stone pavilion I just built out of nothing. Didn't really have a, you know, a real world basis for it. The wood pavilion is quite obviously a kind of a pagoda. And so yeah, so the wooden pavilion is inspired by the traditional pagoda. Now if you just Google it or you just look it up, you'll see plenty of pagodas. I've only got one image here. You know, it's the tower with the flared roofs, and then the roofs are arranged in layers. I mean, I'm sure you know what a pagoda is. So that's basically the idea of it. And so yeah, it's only 2 layers in mine because I want it to be small. And I don't want it to be, you know, competing with the statues by being big. But you know, it's a decent size, decent proportion. And I think out of all the things I've built, that's the most direct copy of a real world model. Like most of the other things I've taken some liberties to interpret them in and change them a bit. This one I think is the most literal. So anyway, that's our little architecture tour for now. I mean, obviously I'll keep building, and then later on I'll make another video of the new things that I've built and the inspirations for those. But for now, that's this one. I hope you found that interesting. I'll see you guys next time.